This could be good. Awesome. So, Nick, before we start, mate, is there anything that you wanted to add with any of the lads?
I just think, afternoon, guys. Hope you're all well. I just think what's probably important is just from today's session and moving forward is to either take a mental note or if you've got a pad and pen with you, and try and take something from this session. And everybody might take something a little bit different. Something you might hear today that actually applies to you, and you think, oh yeah, I've had a similar situation or whatever that might be. And I think it's important that whatever you guys are going through, somebody else has already been through that same issue. And I suppose where we sort of headed with it is we're trying to give you more of an insight into the professional game in terms of people that have had success and actually had a career and made it, but also people that haven't and wherever they fell short on that journey, on that ladder. And everybody's journey is different. And it's such a hard career to go through. But I suppose really it's what messages can you take out of today, that could help you on your journey.
Yeah, awesome, mate. So Nick, if you want to kind of start us off, mate, I think you've got the questions there on what it's going to look like for today in particular.
Yeah, brilliant. And guys, look, if you want to ask any questions as we go through, feel free. But really, what we're going to do is we're going to speak to Cam today, and we're going to look at Cam's journey, and what happened with Cam. So, where did it all start for you, Cam? Your footballing journey?
Yeah, so I was a bit of a weird one. So I wasn't one of the kids like some of these guys who were playing from when they were 4 years old. I wasn't that interested in football until I got to probably 8 years old. I didn't really bother. And the reason for that I might get into a little bit later. And basically it was what all my mates was doing. So in England, some of you guys will have experienced, that's the sport everybody plays. It's like here maybe where everybody plays touch rugby at lunchtime, but over there it's all football. And I think because everybody else was playing it, I felt a little bit left out. And it was just it's a little bit of a different system back over there. So you have what's called Sunday League, which I'm sure I think you guys get a bit of a different impression to what it actually is. Sunday League's kind of where you start. There isn't a kind of a junior NPL. You have your academies at 9 years old, but before that, it's all very social and like you take it serious. At the time, you think it's the World Cup, but obviously, as you get older, it's not. But listen, I was a really late developer. I wasn't anybody who, like some of the guys in here, you probably look at from 8, 9 years old and go, wow, he was unbelievable. I think I picked up things quite naturally. And certainly that 8, 9, 10, 11, I was just a Sunday League player. I played for school and I was certainly one of the better players in those environments. But it was more a case of, I think this is important. You were kind of you love playing. Because I was one of the better players. I was always willing to try things. I wasn't stressed about anything. And yeah, just experimented with positions. I wanted to be like Messi. I was no good at that, so I kept dropping back a position every year, and ended up at the back. So that's kind of how it started in terms of me getting into the game, and then obviously things started to change as I got a little bit older.
Yeah, and I suppose for kids over here, you guys on here, living and growing up over here playing football, your first memories of when you first started. A lot of boys, a lot of girls chase that, that what they call the SAT program over here in the NPL. We didn't have that in the UK. It was, like you say, it was more community. So what were the environments like for you at them young ages as well?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point you made. It's not something I'd really considered, and it certainly wasn't for me. I wasn't trying to be a professional when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. For me, I'd never really seen that academy life. So for me, it was kind of like I just wanted to be the best player in my little zone, wherever that was. And like you say, it certainly wasn't. It was kind of I had a decent coach. He was a nice guy. He wasn't particularly qualified, and then as I got a little bit older, to 8, 9, 10, I think my dad started helping out as well. Again, he loved football, but he's not a proper coach. And so for me, I did my most development when me and my mates would go and play at lunchtime. And, let's say you guys are doing all your sessions or whatever. We were playing before school every break, and then we were going after school and just playing little stupid games, heads and volleys, whatever it was. That's kind of what the environment was for me. I felt kind of in control of, that's football was my thing. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I reported almost like, I feel like sometimes for you guys, it's almost like school where you do your 5 sessions a week, you clock in and you clock out. Whereas for me, it was more a case of I did it when I wanted to because I loved it, if that makes sense. So the environment was really chilled out, mate, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
I didn't feel any pressure or stress with it.
Yeah, I think that's really important messages, that the environment and your early experiences. And I know plenty of very similar. I've had similar experiences myself. But I suppose what I'm sort of going to say is, like, where do you feel that you actually learn parts of the game and learn to sort of probably love the game, really? Did you find that came from your training sessions, or was that just out on the street or out in the playgrounds and them sort of environments?
I think it's a bit of both. I know over the years my answer to this has definitely changed. I think obviously now with my coaching head on, a lot of it you do want it to be that formal education. And I think at that age, like you say, the thing that jumps to mind for me, you love it because you have success. We've spoken about this as a group before, Nick, with the guys in here. Think back to your most successful time, and I think that was it. I pursued football because I happened to be quite good at it when I was just give it a go. And whether I was or not, or my dad told me I was good, and I was led to believe that I was good. So I think you've got to have success. That's what why do you keep going back to do something if you're not having success and you're not enjoying it? So I think that's kind of where that came from, and a lot of my learning did come from just doing. I'd be going to watch the Sheffield United game and then trying to be like, I don't know, Jamie Murphy or whoever, or you're watching Messi and you're trying to do your little Barcelona 1-2s with your mates, and I think that's so important and I've tried to stress this all the time for the guys in here, that please don't let football become a chore, because at some point, if you want to make it a career, it can very easily become that chore. And it's something we'll get into later, but the guys who are successful at the top level still look like they're playing rather than working. So for me, I think that the learning comes from experimenting and trying things and having success at a young age.
Yeah. Like, obviously you touched on a little bit there, but what did you think would help you be successful as a young player? Like back then, what were going through your mind back then as a young player? And is that sort of different now, really?
Yeah. Okay. What I'll be honest, I'll be really honest with everybody on this call. So for me, success was I was never thinking long term, and I probably should have had something in the back of my mind. I'll probably even when I signed with Sheffield United, I was not necessarily thinking about being a footballer. So for me, I was always I got very conscious when I got to 10, 11, and I started getting better. I was always conscious of chasing that academy status. So I started getting to know boys who were playing for professional academies, just like some of you guys will know MPL or first team players, whatever. And I think I was just so desperate to have that status. That's what success looked like for me. I was so desperate to be seen as an academy player. Now you can go through that all you want, and for me, I think again we'll get into it later. I think some mental work before would have been brilliant for me. I was so desperate to chase what I perceived to be success when actually I got it, and we'll get into it. That kind of opened a can of worms in itself. So it definitely has changed for me now, and these guys will probably be sick and tired of me banging on about it. But success is kind of it's kind of a personal feeling of satisfaction of going after the thing that you truly want. I cannot say that that's what happened with me, because I did well to get that academy status, and it was like, all right, then what? And these guys now, hopefully, they've got information which I didn't have at this age, which was the journey never finishes. Just like Nick's probably for 20 years had an amazing coaching career, and he's always wanted that first team job, and he did a great job with Brisbane Roar, and he ain't sat on his lounge outside now saying that's it, I'm done. You're never finished, and just like when I got what I thought I wanted, there's another mountain to climb. So it's not necessarily about getting to the top of the mountain. It's just kind of enjoying the way up, I think.
I think that's a key word, that enjoyment, that enjoying the opportunities to play, and actually just learning to love the game. And obviously you speak there about them younger years where you were striving to get better. I suppose your mates around at school, they were getting better and they were getting picked up, this, that, and the other at different clubs. But I think the key thing is the opportunities to play, wherever that might be, in the playground, at the local club, or whatever that might be. So where did it start into, like, in terms of academy football then? Obviously I know that you got picked up at some point. How did all that come about?
Yeah, so my route was a little bit different. So by this point, I was probably 12 years old. and I was the best player in my Sunday league team, best player at my school. And it's certainly not like the school football here where you've got thousands of people watching. It was on a rubbish pitch. There was no coach. You did it yourself. And I happened to I think we had a game against Sheffield United Academy because we had a kid on my team who was absolutely like lightning. They wanted to look at him actually. And I played pretty well, and they invited me down to. They have like development centres over there, so it's kind of like a second team. Trained with them for a few months and did well, and got invited for a 6-week trial. And my first day on trial at Sheffield United, so I was under 13 or under 14 then. My first day, my age group had a game the night before, so I had to train with not the age group above, but the age group above that, and it was an absolute nightmare. I'll be honest, I got in the car and I cried my eyes out with my mum. I said I don't want to go back.
How did you feel, Cam, when you found that out as well? So you're turning up, nervous as anything anyway.
Yeah.
Like really apprehensive to go into the session. You're expecting the standard to be sky high. You're talking about, an academy status Cat 2 club, Cat 1 club. And you go in there, and all of a sudden, not only is it going to be difficult, now you're training with kids that are a year and 2 years above you. How did you feel about that when you first found that out?
Yeah, the big thing for me was, like you say, I'd already built it up in my head, but I found the social element very tough. I'd kind of put this status on such a pedestal. So it'd be like maybe you guys who don't play in that NPL thing, you think of the NPL being this amazing thing when it's just a set of letters. It doesn't mean anything. Just like I put such an attachment to these. Wow, these guys must be superstars, and I went in, and that's actually why I trained poorly on that day, lads, because when the whistle went for that first session and the ball started rolling, I was like, well, I'm not good enough to be here. So it was kind of like every decision I was making, and it sticks. One thing sticks with me very fondly, and there's two players. I won't name their names because they're both. One of them is playing in the Premier League now. One of them is playing in the Championship. And there was two lads. I tried to pass to one of them, and it was only a 5-yard pass, and I hesitated, and I didn't pass it properly, and it got intercepted. And I remember them both saying, kind of not to me, but so I could hear, like, what's this kid doing here? He can't even make a 5-yard pass. And for me to remember that years later, you can imagine. And that's what I tell the guys. Like, that's how brutal it is. You will get that, lads, because if I did train well, I was coming to take their place off them. So it wasn't quite as glamorous as I think the guys might think it is.
I suppose an interesting point there is, so you've gone in there nervous as hell anyway, and then there's a couple of lads made comments that has shattered your self-confidence and any self-belief that you've got anyway left. What, looking back on that, what would you do? Would you do anything differently? Like, obviously you know a lot more now, but if you had that, you go back in time now, knowing what you know now, would there be anything different about it?
Yeah, I do a lot differently actually, and something for me, I think. Let's say I did train well on that first session. My mentality and my way of thinking was bound to break at some point. If I was always basing my self-belief off what other people thought and feedback from others, at some point you're going to get somebody who's going to want to burn you down. And if you're willing to be burnt down, this ain't the industry for you. So for me, what do differently, I speak to lads about this all the time, is I would have, before I went into that environment, I would have made sure I knew where my game was at. I knew what I was good at. I knew what I was not so good at. And I knew what I needed to work on. And I knew why I wanted to be there. So I was like a tumbleweed. I was just kind of, I get good feedback, I'm going to go here, or people say I'm rubbish, I must be rubbish. So, and by the way, something that impresses me about Australia, but also a lot of the guys on this Zoom call, is how at such a young age they are clear on what they're good at. I never had that. So that's definitely how I'd got that with the people around me back then, it would almost be impossible. So I didn't have the information. If I did, that's 100% what I'd do differently.
So just one more question on that experience that you had there. Did anybody say anything to you? Did any of the coaches say anything to you? Anybody hear it? Anybody make you feel really welcome, or was it quite a cold experience? Or what was that actual experience like for you? So you walked through the door, and found this out. What was that environment like? Set from, because I believe that the coach sets the environment. What was said to you when you walked through the door? Hey, son, you're good enough to be here. Did they make you feel welcome? How was it?
Yeah. No, listen, and Sheffield United is a bit of a weird one anyway, because the particular type of club, it was very kind of rough, and it was all about outrun, outfight. and that was brilliant, and that's why they were successful. Me as a little shy kid from the outskirts of Sheffield, probably I think I did struggle with that, and I certainly didn't feel welcome.
Yeah.
But there was a reason for that, and I look back now, and that was, they wanted to put a price on being there. So I think everybody who walked through the door at first did feel a bit of an outsider, and it was kind of,
Yeah.
if you weren't tough enough up here, then you wouldn't last. And I think it took me a while, and I got there by the end where I and listen, I don't think the coaches did enough, if I'm honest with you,
Yeah.
because there's a line. I thought it was normal now, but me and you know that if we have a lad in for the first time, I'm not to embarrass him. When Hamish turned up for the first time the other week, first thing I did was I sent Charlie Bicker to go and just make sure that at least he knows somebody's name and he's got somebody there.
Yeah.
Because we've all had that first experience, and we've
Mm.
probably all had a bad one. I bet everybody's
Mm.
got a story like I have. Then
100%.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
And you don't feel like you've got any time to impress either, So straight away you're doubting yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a tough one, is that, to be honest. And it's interesting. It's interesting, Cam, that experience. So we spoke about, obviously, you going into trial at Sheffield United. Where did it go from there? Then were you successful? Did you get an opportunity, or
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened?
So I did really well. I think that after that first day, I got my head around things, and actually, it was funny because my second session was with my own age group, and we did some technical testing, which you guys might not have done it. It's kind of like they do some tests on your passing, your dribbling, or whatever, and I beat everybody at my age group.
Mm.
So again, I got confidence from having success. That's the only way you really get true confidence. And after
Yeah.
that, I was kind of like, do you know what? I can do this. I looked around and everything kind of slowed down a little bit. And then after that, played really well in games. And I was
Mm.
I was offered a 2-year contract. I think 4 weeks
Brilliant.
into the 6-week trial.
That's fantastic, mate. While you were in there and you had that extra 2 years and you got that contract, did you feel over that period of time that you belonged there? Did you actually finally think, I do belong here? You had that experience of going in on that 6 week
No,
trial and
no,
feeling how you felt.
until my last few weeks at the club, I never felt good enough, and it was all survival mode, which I've spoke to the lads about
Mm.
before. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of looking back. I thought I was the only one. I think that there's probably everybody was feeling like that, and it is to a certain
Mm.
extent. You are surviving, but it's not a healthy way to live. It's certainly not the way to perform at your best. And this might be, lads here might be thinking the same thing, whatever club they're at. Like, you have to be real. You know what? Your contract might be taken off you. The trouble was for me is I think I placed so much importance because I went to school
Mm.
thinking, oh, I'm the Sheffield United player and blah, 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 blah. I
Yeah.
put so much importance on that it worked against me. There was so much hanging on it.
Yeah.
Again, if I could do things differently, I would. I would build myself as a player. It's not about me playing for X, Y, and Z and doing this and that and the other. It's about me being
Yeah.
good enough, me knowing I'm good enough. So
Yeah.
I didn't do enough work on what do I need to do to get better? What am I good at? It was all chasing statuses and labels, which I think people still do it now. And I
Mm.
think that's probably one of the biggest causes of underachieving in sport in general. Is if you're
Yeah.
chasing a label, eventually, if you get that label or you don't, you ain't going to feel that satisfaction. It's about
Yeah.
it's about the journey. It really is.
I think that's key. And it doesn't matter when you get those opportunities, whether you get them at, you mentioned like 12, 13, getting this opportunity at Sheffield United. You don't have to be in there at 8, 9. If you hadn't got that opportunity at 12 and 13, it's not the end of the world.
Mm.
What matters is the journey that you're on, and having that opportunity at some point on that journey. I think that's key. And actually understanding where you are in it and
Mm.
taking every little bit of information and every little bit of gold dust on that journey to actually help you become not just a better player, but I suppose I don't really want to say a better person, but you mentioned the social side of it and the mental skills.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think they're massive. If you had that opportunity to go back and speak to yourself when you got offered that 2 year deal, what would you say to yourself?
The first thing I'd say is to go all in on it and treat it like, well, the world might end in 2 years' time, and are you going to spend it basically feeling like you're playing in somebody else's team, and that
Mm.
you're just this fringe person on the outside of it? I would say go and
Yeah.
immerse yourself, and like I say to the lads, work as hard as you possibly can. Don't leave any stone unturned, but more importantly,
Yeah.
be brave in every decision you make. Be brave in. I remember one instance. I got to training early. Um, and I was planning on I'm just going to go on the grass and do a little bit of extras. And then I kind of went outside. There was no balls there, and then a couple of the under-18s were there, and I went and sat in the changing room for about an hour and a half. And my mum and dad had
You get
left work
spooked.
early. My mum had left work early to bring me there, and I sat in the changing room just because I was scared to go and practice in front of
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous. You hear it now. I'm sure the
yeah,
lads are like,
yeah,
but that I know that's what it does to young boys' brains.
yeah.
And
That's
go on,
that's
mate.
true. That's true. Sorry, Cam. I was just going to tell a little story here on. So I know a good friend of mine came through at Leeds Academy when Alan Smith came through. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Alan Smith, but Google him. So he came through at Leeds from Tadcaster in Leeds, and he came through, and he obviously went on to play at Man United, this, that, and the other. And as Alan Smith was coming through, I remember my friend telling me this one particular training session. They were doing a basic shooting drill, and he's literally pushing in. He's having his go, and he's moving kids out of the way to take his next go, and kids that are a year and 2 years older than him. He was just that hungry to do it again and do it again and do it again. He would push anyone out of the way just to get in there. He didn't care. He didn't have any fear about him. He was full of self belief and self confidence. And I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but what I'm saying is just an example of he's got no fear, and he didn't care who he had to trample over to get success for him. So it's interesting you say that, Cam.
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely and it's finding that balance because I was never going to be that guy. You can't go from one extreme to the other, but you
Mm.
have to have an element of it. And I would actually love for somebody to say to me before I went in, or when you signed a contract, like, listen, you might have to go and take somebody's shirt here. You might have to go and people that you consider a mate, how it's you or
Yeah,
them. And
yeah,
you do have to have that killer in you, and that's what I speak to the lads about all the time. Like, I'm never going to be the word, oh, nice guys finished last or whatever. There is something in that. There is 100% something in that. The
mm.
people who do get across the line are often the ones who are the ones who are brave enough to take it upon themselves and get the job done.
Yeah. I think you say there, bravery is a key word. Self belief, bravery, probably a lot of things that you've spoken to this term and last term, certainly key. And I think going from your earlier years and probably being probably a big fish in a small pond and being one of the best players on the pitch, and then getting this opportunity to go into Sheffield, and credit to you, you've earned a 2 year deal, and now maybe you're not the big fish anymore, and you're playing within yourself. You're doubting yourself, and you're probably not doing justice to yourself either over those next 2 years. And how did you really cope with it, Cam?
Yeah, that's mate, and you're exactly right by that. By the way, like I look back now and I actually got an extension after that. And the fact I got an extension in that 2 years is bizarre because
Mm,
I've told the lads before, I think I was probably operating at 40% max of my
yeah,
potential in that time.
yeah,
Just out of fear, like the way I physically moved was tense. It was my muscles were always tight. And I learned later on in my coaching career that that's the physical effects that fear and stress have on you. Your muscles tighten up.
100%.
My decision making was poor. My communication was quiet. I had to almost live a second life because I'd go to school and I'd lie about how I'd performed and oh yeah, I'm taking free kicks now, and I'm like, you're not. You sat there. You're the quiet one. And again, my mum and dad weren't from that like high performance environment. So the people around me, I guess I didn't know any different.
Mm,
So I think I would have been amazing if I was able to access some information or had that like reference point of I knew
yeah.
somebody who'd done it. Do you know what I mean? But
Mm.
yeah, I didn't really have that.
I think really we're not even talking about football and ability here. We're
No,
talking
no.
about the social environment, the mental side of the game. That's really what underpins what you do in terms of your technical and tactical ability, and that's massive and that's key. So looking back, I'm sure upon reflection and years gone by, that like as you've alluded to this afternoon, there's plenty of things that you would change. Um, and you've mentioned about what it looked like for you as a little bit as a player. What other aspects, apart from the technical, tactical side, do you wish that you would have had at that time?
Yeah, listen, I'll tell anyone who listen. Like for me, I think the mental work is by far more important than anything. Because listen, my technical ability was always there, and I think that was never going to be the thing that made me fall short. And I didn't have professional coaching. You know, the technical aspect I think you can get if you're willing to put in the hours on the street or whatever. That's not a problem for me.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm sat here on the Zoom call and probably not in England playing at a good level is because of that mental side of, okay, what did a good performance for me look like? What did a good season? How did I have to approach a season? How did I have to approach my teammates and where I stood in the pecking order? And how did I get a new contract? And how did I set my goals and everything like this? And this is why, lads, hopefully today's giving you a little bit of an insight of kind of why I go on about the things I go on about. Because,
Yeah.
by the way, this isn't just me. I think you'll find a lot of players who nearly made it will have a very similar story to myself. And, you know, the ability I had, did I make the most of it? Probably not. Listen, I wasn't one of them kids like Wayne Rooney who was ever going to play in the Premier League, but you know, I got very, very close, and like I said, I never probably was my authentic self. I was never that beast that I was when here's one thing, lads. I was when I went to school and played on the playground, I was unbelievable. I'd just dribble past players, beat players, score goals, whatever. And I wouldn't be that same player. It would be a different player who played at
Yeah.
Sheffield United
Yeah.
and eventually Doncaster. So, you know, it's all well and good telling yourself that, oh yeah, I'm good because I'm good on the playground. It's about doing it when it matters and having that, you know, access to that.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to knowledge and what you know now as well. And I think a big thing that I'm hearing from your experiences there at Sheffield is you were almost like a passenger, really,
Yeah,
and not
yeah,
you need to be the driver. You need to drive yourself. You need to take and control everything that you can control, and not let other people control it, or other parts of the environment control it. You actually need to be the driver, and you need to put one foot forward and take care of that, really. So, you know, in that time there as well, what are I know we spoke about some of the tough moments, but can you give us a couple of examples of a couple of tough moments that you had, Cam, age sort of like 13 to 16?
yeah. Okay, so there's a couple that stick out for me, and one in particular. And again, I think this is a good reference to the lads because they might have had a similar thing. So we often speak about, Nick, about them games where you just want the ground to swallow you up. One in particular comes to mind even now. So anybody know Sunderland, who nearly went up to the Premier League? Their left winger, called Jack Clarke. He's a really, really good player. Some of you might have heard of him. He's signed for Tottenham. He played for Leeds Academy growing up, and he was always like the one who you didn't want to play against. And I remember a game. He was just one of them nightmares. I was playing centre back. He was playing up front. He scored a hat trick every time I had the ball. I was literally dribbling with it. He'd be shouting all sorts of names at you, calling you every name under the sun, saying you're effing whatever. Um, and I just remember the coaches kind of. I did one thing where I was kind of playing centre back. I tried to play a ball into midfield, got cut out, and they scored. And the coach for my team just turned around. They just didn't want anything to do. And that kid Jack went and grabbed the ball and just walked past me. Like, what are you even doing here? And again, just them games where one mistake just compounded, and it was just there was no reset for me. It was I've done something wrong. It was no clear reset. It was like, oh God, get me off this pitch. And then I did something else, get me off this pitch. Then I'd take up a bad position, trying to overcompensate. And them games, and this is why I speak to the lads about it all the time. They're the ones where that's when you do start, or you feel a little twinge in your hamstring. I'm going to come off. I'm going to pretend it's a really bad
Yeah,
one. And you do, and
yeah,
everybody. I never like because I've done this a million times. I'll never shame somebody for. I'll say, listen, that's it's not hurting that much. You had an absolute stinker of 5 minutes. Let's just reset. And I never had that, mate. I never thought it was even an option. I thought you either had a perfect game or it was the end of the world. You know,
yeah. I think
you're
you
never
talk
going to
about
have a
being
career with that mentality.
no, not all. Every little setback, whether it's you're having a bad game, you're having a stinker, whatever it is, like you say, you've got to reset, and it's like putting yourself back in credit. The next thing you do, can you just take care of that pass? Bang, we're back in credit, and it's having that really about you. But again, I think a lot of that does come back down to environment. But I suppose if you haven't got that environment, you haven't got that support around you, you have got to be strong. You have got to be mentally strong and tough to actually fight your way through those moments. Really. So where did it all sort of? How did it all finish up at Sheffield United, Cam?
Yeah, so to be fair, it's not the horror story that I've kind of made it out to be. Like as the years went on, I certainly improved socially, and I became one of the better players in the group. And so
Mm,
I got to 16 years old there, and that last 6 months I've been smashing it and doing really well. I think because then under 18s are off by themselves, so we were like the top dogs, if that makes sense, and that allowed me to flourish. And the
yeah,
feedback I was getting was good, and unfortunately, like I was told I was going to get a scholarship there, and lads, this is how it kind of goes back there. And one day I just turned up on a Saturday morning game, and I was on the bench. I was like, I should be starting, and there was a new lad called George who just been released from Man United. And he actually came and took my scholarship. And to be fair, he's playing in the Championship now, but that's how it was. You know, I was playing. I'd worked all this time, got through all this kind of struggle or whatever. So finally, I was doing things right. And then one day,
mm,
now George from Man United's in, and then 2 weeks later, I was released.
yeah. And that's tough to deal with as well. How did you go about dealing with that?
Yeah,
Being released.
it was a weird one. I think it was the making of me because, like you said earlier, Nick, you do need to be the driver. I do think that
Mm,
moment was the one that flipped for me, and I became that. You know what? I'm not letting this happen again. But in terms of how
mm,
do I deal with it, I didn't have time. So I was in year 11, which we don't have year 12. So that was my
yeah,
exams. I had exams going on. And literally, it was a case of I would get in my car I'd get in my mum's car after school in a plain training kit. And by the 10th session, I didn't even know where I was going. She was driving me to Burton Albion, Rotherham,
yeah,
Doncaster, Leeds, Barnsley. That's what it was. I was just going on trial everywhere. And I've told the lads before, trials are as bad as it gets because certainly at 16, because just like that
yeah,
Man United kid took my scholarship, every single change room I went into, there was
mm,
no welcoming because everybody there knew exactly what I was there to do. Um,
yeah. Everybody's
so,
fighting.
but listen, at that age, I think it makes you a man having to walk into school the next day and feel like you've lost all your value or whatever. Um, but I ended up signing a scholarship at Doncaster, and I think things started to kind of pick up from there, definitely.
Yeah. And when you went to Donny, so you've gone from Chef U, obviously a higher category club, a more established club, and then you go into Donny. From your experiences at Chef United, did you put any of those reflections into place when you went to Donny, or was it a little bit more the same?
Now, to be honest, mate, and I think it worked out well. I was able to kind of use them, and I certainly made it. I'm giving this everything, leaving no stone unturned. And we might get into it later on how that probably took it too far. But
Yeah.
I certainly I was, you know, Doncaster. By the way, so I was from Sheffield, so Doncaster would be like playing in. It was like I'd gone from playing for Brisbane Strikers to being released to then having to go and play for Gold Coast Knights. So every
Mm,
morning I have to get up at 5 a.m. and get the train. It was freezing, horrible. Doncaster
yeah.
isn't like the Gold Coast, believe me. And go and travel down there and that's what it was for me. And when all my mates were finishing school and going to wherever, and I think that really helped me toughen up. But no, I left it no stone unturned, and that was my thing. I'm not
Mm.
gonna make the same mistake again.
So where would you say you were at that time then? So you said when you were at Chef U, you played within yourself, essentially at 40%. Where were you at Donny? Where would you say you
I
were then?
think it ebbed and flowed, and I certainly never found the perfect formula. I
Mm,
always struggle with consistency. I found that when I was right on trial, I've got nothing to lose here. I was always at my
yeah,
best. I've always struggled with as soon as I got that contract, kind of, you know, because I never felt I was taking my foot off the gas. Coaches would often say, "Cam, now you give you a contract, you've took your foot off the gas." I never felt I was doing that, but actually, again, I was letting the fear creep in. Oh, I played well last week.
yeah,
I've got to play well again and again. And it was
yeah,
like this vicious cycle. I was like, you can never win. But it was different problems. So before I was like, it was playing within myself. I wouldn't say I was. I think I was actually trying to control too much. I was thinking too much then. That was the
yeah,
problem for me. I thought, I've overcome this challenge. I've got it all figured out. But obviously it's 16, 17, 18. You don't.
mm, yeah. And you've done really well there as well to get that setback at Chef U and end up at Donny and having been on trial everywhere. And like you alluded to, it's not an easy process at all to go
Mm.
through. And I suppose it does make you a little bit more robust going through those experiences. Um, and having had that setback at Chef U, it makes you sort of think, well, this could be my last opportunity now. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like you say there, you probably gave it a little bit more, and let that fear loose a little bit by going to Donny. And so, how close did you come at Donny, and what were your experiences there then?
Yeah, so it was kind of a story of two problems. So sorry, of 2 years. So my first year at Donny, I started off I wasn't even playing for the under-18s.
Yeah,
And there was actually an Australian lad who was there in my position, and he was a year above me. As the years went on, a coach came in about 3 or 4 months, and it was Gavin Strachan actually. So Gordon Strachan's son came in to work with
yeah,
Darren
no, Gav, yeah,
Ferguson, who was the manager, and he
yeah,
took a real liking to me because I would always put the goals out, make sure they're in the right place, and I think I felt kind of somebody seen my potential. And by the end of my
yeah,
first year, I was training with the first team every day, and I was the 19th man against Wigan in League One, and that was
yeah,
when I was just turned 17, and I was flying. I thought I'm definitely going to get a pro deal because I was starting for the 23s every week when I was 17, and
yeah,
then bizarre. So Doncaster had a good season in that little break, which never happens. Nick, you'll know this. Darren Ferguson just left. He didn't get sacked. He just left. He didn't go to a different club, and it was because of something behind the scenes. And he took the coach who really liked me with him. And I was kind of like, oh, it's happened
yeah,
again. I've done this years of hard work, and thought I'd kind of got
yeah,
to where I needed to, and I felt, oh, I've got to start again. Now, obviously, I didn't. I was at the same level. It's in my head. I'm still looking for other people's approval. So
yeah,
in that second year, I started really well, and I was on the bench for the first team a couple of times in League One.
yeah,
Um, and basically for me, lads, and this is for anybody, I had a kind of a long term injury in my hip, which got misdiagnosed. But I was kind of like, I knew I've got a problem. I'm just going to play a really good game in front of the first team manager, and then
yeah,
I'll report my injury. And obviously, I was playing at 75%, 70%, whatever. And that game never came. And it was playing against Big John Parkin, actually. It was a big lad. And I just had a horrendous game. And the first team manager was there watching. And I was like, I can't do this. So I reported my injury thinking I might be out for a month. And that was the last game I ever played for Doncaster because I ended up being out for 6 or 7 months, whatever it was. And
yeah.
I was released during that. So um, yeah, plenty of mistakes there that hopefully some of the lads can kind of go, well, you're an idiot, Cam. I'm definitely not going to do that.
Yeah. I think interesting that. Oh, for those of you that don't know, guys, Gavin Strachan, the coach there, that like Cam, he was he's still at Celtic actually. Ange Postecoglou's first team coach at Celtic. He played over at Hartlepool when I was there as well. Great guy, great coach. But yeah, I suppose what's key there is obviously different clubs, different coaches, different people. Everybody might have a different opinion as well. So, you know, there's clubs and people that took a fancy to your Cam, and there's people that didn't. So, and that's life, and that's what you've got to deal with, and you've got to get on with. And you know, you might not be everybody's sort of cup of tea if you like, but it's being again mentally resilient and mentally robust, and having that grit and determination about you that you know you're going to be true to yourself. And again, we talk about being the driver. You know, be the driver, and wherever that might take you on your journey, I think that's really important. And you might not get there, but you've got to be true to yourself. I think that's the key message there with a lot of
Yeah,
that camp.
yeah. I couldn't agree more, lads. And that's kind of why I always bang on about the you've got to take control of everything. What can you actually control? Not
Mm,
necessarily loads about your performance. You always control your body language, your approach, your mentality, and it's all just the games. Your career is played up here.
mm,
You might play in the Premier League, but if you're always wanting to win the Ballon d'Or, you'll never be happy.
yeah,
Or you might
yeah,
play in the NPL and have the most amazing flowing career that you enjoy. You know, success is not defined by anything really. It's all up here, lads. And you know, I think a lot of you lot would probably look at my career, and if I offered you that now, you'd take it because you'd say, "Oh, I played for." But I don't look at it like that. I kind of look at my
mm,
thing as a failed football, if that makes sense.
yeah, and that's not true. You know, you've achieved what an awful lot of people that have not achieved. You know you've achieved it, and that's credit to you as well. And I think it's really important that you know where you are in there as well. So, you know what? Just last couple of minutes because there's some really good stuff in here. And guys, you know, I hope you're taking something from this as well. I think that's the key really about this afternoon. Um, what really, just to sort of summarize in a way, what are or what were your biggest sort of struggles of being a professional footballer on your journey?
Yeah.
I think
So
we've alluded to a couple already, but
yeah. To summarize it for me, and I actually didn't realize this at the time. There's work with a guy that I've shared with a lot of the lads that's kind of helped me over the years make sense of it. But the fear I was under, and I don't mean of just fear of playing bad or whatever. It was just a constant surrounding of football became fear for me. And it was just like for like you never knew the difference. So it was because I attached so much self-worth to it. My values to my friends and everything was being the footballer. And then this fear about keeping that status. And then this fear about playing well and fear of keeping your
yeah,
contract and and fear of not getting injured. And if you let it happen, lads, it'll come and it'll eat you alive. Because and by the way, I know that happens for 80-90% of lads who want to be a player. Um,
100%.
that for me has always been the biggest struggle, and it's only really this year where I've done a lot of work with psychologists and whatever. And I speak to a lot of you guys, just really letting go as a player, and you've done the hard work over the years. Again, like we speak,
Mm,
sweat and courage. I know I've done the work, the sweat, I've worked, and then it's just when the whistle goes, having the courage to be yourself and make them brave decisions.
yeah. So, like in your opinion, Cam, what what do sort of successful footballers have in common? So the guys that make it and have careers in the game, what do all these guys have in common? Because I know some players that made it that weren't the most technically gifted players,
Yeah,
and be back in England. Like you could be, I don't know, down the local pub in the afternoon, and there's some really talented players in there that you couldn't believe why they didn't make it. But yeah, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be an ingredient, and there's got to be something about why they didn't make it.
yeah. So for me, mate, and I might be wrong in this, but I don't think it's just football. I think it's high performers in general. All have a level of what I would call healthy disrespect. They're all willing to cross the line if they have to, and what I mean by that, and I think that gets a bad connotation, but they're the guys who, when it's 1-1 in a tight game, they're the
Mm,
ones who want the ball. And that want the ball, I think, is a good metaphor. Yeah, and that might be, by the way, inside of football or outside of football, wanting the ball in tight situations, and wanting to have responsibility and not caring what people think. For me, that's everything. They're true to
mm,
themselves. They're authentic. They're willing
mm,
to stick their chest out and say, "Look at me. This is who I am," and they're willing to fail.
mm.
If you want to be a perfectionist, brilliant, but it'll come and get you slowly.
Yeah, it comes back to confidence, doesn't it? And control, emotional control,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that's that side of the game really. So just to finish off, Cam, how do you get it? How do you get that? How do you get good at that?
Um, it's an unbelievable. I think for me, it was probably too late. Now the boys in here, I think, are a perfect age of, if that 12 to 16 age group. So from until you get to 12, I think you need to learn the love of the game. From 12 to 16, you've got to know yourself when you get to
Yeah,
16, if you can, and know where you're at, and kind of when you're 18, you almost need to be almost bulletproof to people's opinions. You need to pick up
yeah,
knowledge, but people's opinions, like you heard there, lads. I had people telling me I was the next best thing and the worst thing in the world. Like, people are going to talk. That's what the game is. Now, how you get it
mm,
is the $1 million question, mate. And I think it is just being brave enough to be yourself, and that is so
yeah,
much harder than it actually looks like. And it's just like
mm,
you at Brisbane Roar, and you being brave enough to do it your way, just like some of the lads here in Jack Hobbs's under-11 Brisbane City team. It's all the same thing. And the minute you
yeah.
start thinking that, oh, when I just get to this level, I'll be brave, forget it, because it's up to you where you keep it.
And it's interesting as well. Obviously, I'm a bit older now and a little bit wiser, but and again, it comes back to if you knew back then what you know now. So I was able to sort of be brave with that, and I suppose looking back about your opportunities, Cam, I'm sure like you said earlier, there's loads you do differently, and I think potentially looking back, if you had done them differently as you would do, then it could have turned out a lot different as well.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
these are the key things, guys. Yeah. So listen, that's it, Cam. Really, has anybody got any questions at all on what we've spoken about? Is there any sort of thing in there, lads, that has been sort of key for you or really stood out to you over this sort of past nearly 60 minutes, 50 minutes, or whatever it is. Is there anything in there for you? What are you taking home from it?
You need to be willing to fail, or you need to be accepting that if you fail, it's not the end of the world.
It's not, but what is that? Making mistakes is just a learning opportunity. That's all it is, Sonny. And if you're not put in difficult, challenging environments, then you don't get those opportunities to grow as a person and develop. And I think that's really key. So that's a really good take home message there. That's what I call gold dust. That's your little bit of gold dust from today. Has anybody got anything else?
Oh yeah, to not live in fear with like all the decisions you make, because you've got to be brave with what you make in your decisions.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's easier said than done as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
But being consciously aware of it is really important. Then it's a case of putting that into practice as well, and trying to release that fear and almost harnessing that fear. Really.
Yeah.
Anyone else, guys?
Yeah, you gotta avoid worrying if someone's better or bigger or stronger than you.
Yeah.
But like it's just like yeah.
Just worry about what
you just
control what you can control, Vince, isn't it? Sorry, did you get me? Hello?
What?
Yeah, that's right, Vince, isn't it? Yeah, so it's just controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody got anything else that they want to share with us? You take your own message.
I got don't go chasing labels and just play to improve yourself.
100%. And your journey is going to look different to the geezer sat next to you. It doesn't really matter. There's no fast track to it. It's just where you are in your journey and looking at taking the appropriate steps forward to each and every day and each and every week, just developing yourself as a person and as a player. I think that's real key as well. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Anything, Cam?
No. Just thanks to the lads for listening to me ramble there, and hopefully, kind of that should. And the guys in here should know by now. I don't like to kind of go over, and I'm certainly no one to kind of look at and want to be like that. But hopefully, it should kind of give you some reasons for the things that we speak about. And it's we're not, me and Nick haven't sat here like scientists coming up with these fancy theories. These are things that we've learned through tough times and working at a good level of football where you guys want to go. So I really, if anyone's got any questions or anything, I know it can be quite hard to get questions on live and then they'll all text me 5 minutes after. So if you have got anything that you want to know, shoot me over a message or jump on now. But just before, go
on, Cam. Yeah, guys, how did you find that listening to Cam's journey? How did you find it from your personal journey and your perspective? Is that something that you think is beneficial?
Yeah, of course, because it's much different to everyone else's journey.
Yeah. And, there's something in there, 3 or 4 of you already highlighted, something that you're taking away from it. So that's interesting. Would that be of interest to you? Because our thoughts with it are part of this is understanding, successful journeys, maybe not, I wouldn't say unsuccessful journeys, but being inside sort of a journey of footballers, basically. So we've got a professional footballer that's coming on that's going to do the same sort of thing that Cam's done. And we're going to share that with you. Is that something that you'd like to hear as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. No, that's good, Cam. Cam, I'll let you wrap this up, mate, because I'm just sat just outside the house, so I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Great to see you guys. Great to see you. I'll speak to you
Thanks,
soon.
Nick.
Cheers, Nick.
Bye.
See you, mate.
Thanks,
See you
Nick.
later. See you.
Thanks,
See you
Nick.
guys.
Yeah, guys. So just a really, really quick one from me. So obviously, please let's get all your Zoom calls booked in. Thanks for listening to that. And as I say, if you've got anything, let me know. Just before we go, so term 3 for the mentorings, it's going to look different. I'll be really honest with you. I found it tough in term 1 and term 2 with commitments at Pro Player and other places to to be able to manage it all. So it's going to look differently. Like me and Nick are building a kind of a platform for we're going to open it out. So the mentoring is going to kind of have loads of people on it, and we're going to make videos like that once a week, and kind of we just want to bring the content to you, you guys who want to kick on, because I feel like sometimes not everybody who comes to us is there because they want to get better, whereas I know everybody in here is. So that's something that we'll go through individually when we have a chat, but I love all of you to be a part of it. Thanks for everything today. Thanks for everything this term. And yeah, let's get your Zoom calls booked in and finish off the term strong and get ready for the next one.
Thanks, Nick. Bye.
Thanks, Nick.
Cheers, mate. See you, mate. See you, fellas.
Bye.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Cam.
mate.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Cam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
Ladies. All good, Jacko?
Yeah, I'm all good. That's it. Thank you.
No, all good, mate. Top man.